Today we're going to make a ragu alla bolognese. A ragu is a meat sauce with onions and a little bit of tomato sauce in it. The bolognese is very similar, except that we're going to put in onions and carrots, celery, green and yellow peppers. There's going to be some heavy cream added at the end, and it's a tomato sauce. So it's very similar to a regular ragu. But please don't be intimidated by it. The most important thing is to have everything prepped and ready to go before you start. It can seem a little bit daunting. The best thing to do is to have your recipe written down, because of the number of ingredients. There's no way you're going to remember everything and the quantities and get it together. So the first thing I've done is I've assembled all of our ingredients. We're going to use 2 ounces of extra virgin olive oil, 1 cup of diced yellow onions, 1 cup each. This is a brunoise, they're an 1/8" diced green and yellow peppers. And we're going to use 2/3 of a cup each brunoise cut of celery and carrots. Also, we're going to use 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. 1 cup of chicken stock, 1 pound of ground beef, 1 pound, or rather 1/2 pound of ground pork. The bolognese normally has, different than the plain ragu, usually uses 2 different kinds of meat. It could be beef and pork, beef and veal. Many people use a sausage in place of the pork. You could use pancetta, but in this case we're using 1 pound of the 80/20 ground beef and 1/2 pound of 80/20 ground pork. We also have 2 teaspoons of dried basil, 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 bay leaf, 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. We're going to use 1/8 teaspoon of nutmeg. 1 can, these are San Marzano tomatoes from Italy. We're going to use 1 can, 28-ounce can, crushed tomatoes. We're going to use 1 28-ounce certified San Marzano hand whole peeled tomatoes from Italy. We're going to use a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, 1 cup of red or white wine. Classically it's white wine. I'm using red because that's what I have that's open. I grate my own Parmesan cheese. Left over from grating the cheese is the Parmesan cheese rind, and we're going to throw this in for flavor and remove it when the sauce is done. What I haven't put out here, because it goes in at the end, is we're going to use 2 tablespoons of fresh chopped flat leaf parsley and 1 cup of heavy cream. The dried herbs are always added in the beginning of a recipe, and the fresh herbs are always added at the end. Okay, what I've got here is a 6.5 quart Dutch oven, and I also have a large saute pan for sauteing off the ground beef and pork. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, and we will add to it green and yellow peppers. In French cooking, a mirepoix is onions, carrots, and celery. It adds flavor to soups and sauces. And in Italy, a mirepoix is called a sofrito. It is exactly the same thing. And in Creole cooking, it is slightly different. It's green peppers, onions, and celery. It's called the Creole Holy Trinity, whereas the sofrito in Italian is the Holy Trinity of vegetables. There, we're going to take and put this on the stove. We're going to sweat all the vegetables until they become soft. Okay, while we're sweating the vegetables, I'm adding the ground beef and the ground pork to the saute pan, and we're going to saute and chop this up. And then after it's rendered the fat out of it, we're going to drain the fat and add this to our vegetables that have been sweating. Okay, while the beef is cooking and the vegetables are sweating, I've opened up our cans of tomato paste, crushed tomatoes, whole tomatoes. We're going to take our whole tomatoes, and you'll notice the San Marzano tomatoes from Italy have a very thick rather than very liquid juice around the tomatoes. We're going to dump them into a bowl, and we're going to take and hand crush the tomatoes before we put them in the pan with everything else. This is a traditional way of doing the tomatoes. The tomatoes are packed. You'll find in there will be a little piece of basil in there. That the tomatoes, when they're packed in Italy, do come with some basil in it. Okay, we're stirring the vegetables, and we're going to add our garlic to the vegetables, and we're going to let this cook for 2 minutes just to release the aroma of the garlic. You can take a look. It's a beautiful color. The green and yellow peppers, the onions, carrots, and celery makes for a nice color effect. So we're going to let this garlic cook for a couple minutes. After the garlic cooks for 2 minutes, we're going to add our 1 cup of chicken stock. Okay, we cooked the garlic for 2 minutes. We're now going to add a cup of chicken stock to our vegetables that have been softened by sweating. We're going to stir this around for a little bit, and we're going to bring this up to a boil. And as we're bringing this up to a boil, we're going to add our 28-ounce can of crushed San Marzano tomatoes, and we will stir that. Okay, as this is coming to a boil, I'm going to add all our herbs and spices, starting off with the bay leaf, the 2 teaspoons of basil, the 1 teaspoon of oregano, the 2 teaspoons of sugar, the ½ teaspoon of salt, the ¼ teaspoon of crushed red pepper, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. And we're going to stir this up to incorporate all the herbs and spices. We're going to add now our 6 ounces of wine and our 6 ounces of tomato paste. We will mix this all together. I have a nice small spatula for getting inside the can of tomato paste. And we will take and mix this all up, incorporating the tomato paste. And now that that's incorporated, if you notice I'm using a heat-resistant spatula, I don't have to worry about it melting in the sauce. We're going to take my hand-crushed San Marzano tomatoes, add that to the pan. We will bring this to a boil now, and then we will let it simmer for about an hour to 2 hours. Tasting it, we're going to partially cover this so it doesn't splatter all over my stove and we don't get too much of an evaporation. So we'll cover it just like that with that lid, and we'll come back and check on this in about an hour and a half. Okay, as usual, and why I said you have to have the recipe all written down because of the number of ingredients. A couple of things I didn't do is we've taken the beef and pork and we've drained them. Those have to be added as we're going to simmer this. And then the other thing we want to do is take our Parmesan cheese rind, throw that into the sauce. We're going to mix this all up, and we'll let this simmer for that hour and a half. Maybe we can even let it simmer up to 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And at the end, we will add our fresh parsley and our 1 cup of heavy cream. Our sauce is simmered for 2 hours now on a small burner. If you'll notice, this is a different pot than I started with. I put it into a smaller pot, and the reason for that was not being perfect, and if you don't watch things really close, you can scorch the bottom of the pan. If you do happen to do that, your sauce isn't ruined, just pour it into another pot, but do not scrape the burnt stuff from the bottom of the pan because that will taint your flavor of your sauce. I'm taking out the cheese because the sauce has been simmered. I'm going to add our 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley and our 1 cup of heavy cream. Classically, in Rome, they would take and add milk, and they would add the milk when they were cooking the meat, and then add the tomatoes to the meat after the milk has been evaporated. I like it this way, and because I added a cup of cold cream, I'm going to slide this back on to my simmer burner, and we're going to let that reheat. And while that is reheating, I've got a pot of boiling water on, and I'm going to cook some imported egg pappardelle pasta, which is a little wider than a fettuccine. It's a nice pasta, and it will cook in about 9 minutes once the water comes to a boil. After the pasta's come back to a boil, I'm going to remove the lid, and it'll cook for 9 minutes. I've drained the noodles, but you can see it. I've returned them to the stock pot that I cooked them in. What I'm going to do is take and ladle my sauce into the saucepan and toss the noodles in the saucepan. It makes it a little bit easier. And then I will put them in the serving bowl. If you'll notice, I don't need an awful lot of this sauce to coat all of the pasta, and we can serve a little bit of the sauce on the side if people want some extra sauce. And I'm going to take and put this in a pasta bowl. I've put the pappardelle in a pasta bowl to be served. What we're going to do is we're going to garnish it with a little bit of fresh chopped parsley and some fresh grated Parmesan cheese, and there you have it.